Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's Information Week webinar, Perfecting IT Automation in 2025, a roadmap for CIOs, sponsored by Team Dynamics and broadcast by Informa Tech Target. I'm Brandon Taylor with Information Week, and I'll be your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. This webinar is designed to be interactive. The dock of widgets found at the bottom of your screen will allow you to learn about today's speakers, download resources, share this webinar via social media outlets, and participate in the Q&A session that takes place at the end of our presentation. Toward the end of our webinar, we will ask you all to provide feedback via the survey widget, which is also found at the bottom of your screen. Please take a minute to fill this out before leaving us today, as your feedback will provide us with valuable information on how we can improve future events. Lastly, if you all are experiencing any technical problems, please click the help widget found at the bottom of your screen or type your issue into the Q&A window, and we will be glad to offer one-on-one assistance. Now on to the presentation, Perfecting IT Automation in 2025, a roadmap for CIOs. So how do you choose which processes to automate first and which tools to deploy? What are the pitfalls and obstacles that will waste money and slow deployment down? How do you measure and validate your success in the process? In today's broadcast, learn how real organizations have answered these questions and more, and get a practical approach to achieving automation success. Discussing today's topic is Sidney Prescott, Director of Innovation and Artificial Intelligence at Nomura Research Institute, or NRI. And joining Sidney is Andrew Graff, Chief Product Officer at Team Dynamics. Again, if you want to learn any more information about our speakers today, you can find their bios in the speaker bio window on your screen. And again, if you want to ask our speakers any questions today, which we strongly encourage you all to do, please use the Q&A window also found in the middle of your screen. Sidney, over to you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Brandon. So I am very excited to be with everyone today, and I will be talking about the autonomous enterprise, how we can perfect IT automation in 2025 and beyond. And today we're going to explore how IT automation is evolving and why mastering it is critical for future-ready enterprises. And we're also going to talk a bit about the transformative power of autonomous systems, more specifically the strategic edge that they offer enterprises. And I'll share my vision for the future of autonomous IT. My background really blends hands-on engineering and also my passion for driving innovation in AI and automation at scale. Now, let's dive into the core capabilities of the autonomous enterprise and how AI, real-time orchestration, and cognitive automation are reshaping the future of IT. So welcome to the autonomous enterprise. This is really where IT runs smarter, faster, and on its own terms, powered by AI, real-time orchestration, and cognitive automation. To compete in a world of exponentially complex, enterprises need self-governing systems that adapt and evolve without human bottlenecks. And today we're going to explore real-world breakthroughs, everything from natural language workflows to predictive scaling and automated policy-driven operations. When you think about the future of IT, it isn't reactive, it's autonomous. So let's dive in. In today's tech landscape, our CIOs can't just adapt, they really have to reinvent the game. So that really means forgetting rigid structures and old school management. To thrive, our leaders must orchestrate AI-powered agents, design architectures built for constant change, and use real-time feedback loops to continuously evolve. When we're speaking about governance, we have to automate it intelligently. When we're speaking about adaptability, we have to measure and master it. It's very important to note that these 5 shifts aren't just strategies, they're your roadmap to resilience, innovation, and most importantly, lasting competitive advantage. Now, let's talk a little bit about why traditional automation is failing and why it's going to be crucial in the coming years to rethink automation from the ground up. So automation as we've known it is fundamentally broken. Manual processes can't keep pace. Our human interventions that we've put in place are too costly, and our IT landscapes have truly become astonishingly complex. Today, APIs, microservices, and cloud architecture simply demand something smarter. Fragmented automation that we see across different business verticals is obsolete, which means it's really time for us to embrace AI-driven orchestration, intelligent automation that adapts in real time, and also cognitive systems that think for themselves. When we talk about the future, it truly isn't about scripts. It's going to be about systems that are learning, responding, and evolving. Let's talk through the trajectory of technology and really explore how in the coming years, automation won't just support business, it's truly going to reinvent it. Now, when we talk about automation, we really have to think about what has been the evolution. So we've come from scripts and cron jobs of the 1980s and 90s to ITSM workflows and even robotic process automation in recent decades. And what we're seeing now is the rapid pace of business demands are simply outpacing traditional methods. We have rising operational costs, increasingly complex IT environments, and all of that has really rendered these typical manual interventions and fragmented automation ineffective. So we really have to start thinking about how can the enterprise embrace AI-driven real-time orchestration and also cognitive automation to remain agile and competitive. I truly have seen a shift, particularly this year, and I believe that advanced AI is going to begin to power these cognitive automation ecosystems, and that's going to usher in a new era of intelligent, self-regulating automation. Now, if you think about automation that's not just scripted, but intuitive, and what I mean by intuitive is where you describe complex processes in plain language and your system can instantly respond, no coding required. So this is really the power of generative AI and how it's going to fundamentally reinvent IT operations. So these intelligent software agents will perceive, reason, and proactively manage your systems. And that's going to turn diverse data from text to telemetry into real-time decisions. And when we're talking about real-time decisions, that's going to mean that networks will have the capability to dynamically heal themselves. And that's going to make sure that we have seamless, uninterrupted service. Now, automation workflows are also going to have the ability to sense the pulse of the business. And what that means is we'll be able to adapt instantly to shifting environments, user feedback, and strategic goals. But what I'm speaking of truly isn't the future. It is honestly right around the corner. Now, we've talked a little bit about the future of AI-powered IT operations, generative workflows, autonomous agents, but what is actually powering it all? So that's really going to be a next generation architecture, and it's going to be centered around LLMs, so large language models, and those are going to translate natural language into dynamic workflows and intelligent policies. We also have been seeing the rise of agent AI. So that's really going to be autonomous software agents that can proactively resolve issues across IT domains. And that's going to be guided by real-time analytics and predictive insights. And at the foundation of all of this, it's really a smart governance mesh. And that mesh is going to ensure security, compliance, and strategic alignment across the enterprise. So let's talk a little bit about how enterprises today are starting to bring this future into reality. When you think about the real-time capabilities of AI-powered IT operations, what we're speaking about is really how we can take LLMs and turn those plain English requests into fully orchestrated workflows. And that means monitoring systems that are detecting anomalies and remediating incidents in real time. We're also talking about infrastructure that can scale itself, and it's driven by predictive AI, analyzing live telemetry. And when we talk about automation, it's not just about automation running, it's truly about automation that can learn, adapt, and optimize. And these aren't just concepts that are kind of living out in the research fields of AI and cognitive automation. These are truly concepts that are live in the enterprise today. Let's talk a little bit more specifically about security ops and explore how autonomous threat detection, honeypots, and self-contained responses are redefining security in today's IT world. So when we talk about SecOps, autonomous SecOps is really reshaping how enterprises defend at scale, AI-driven threat graphs, and that really helps you to map out attack vectors in real time. And what you're really trying to do is reveal intent and potential impact on your environment. When we talk about honeypots, we're talking about machine-generated honeypots that can lure and study adversaries. And then we have policy-based agents that we can plug in as well, and those can instantly isolate threats. And the beauty of all of this is you really don't need human intervention. Reinforcement learning continuously evolves response strategies. And what that does is it makes our security orchestration smarter with every single incident that we come across. And this is truly how security is going to adapt, respond, and improve autonomously. Now, when we're talking about autonomy, let's talk about a little bit how AI is transforming network operations, and it's turning it into a more of a predictive, self-optimizing system that is specifically built for speed and resilience. So when we talk about LLMs, we are talking about being able to analyze telemetry to make proactive routing decisions in the environment. We also have started to see a rise in the use of autonomous agents that are reshaping topologies, and that's on the fly as bandwidth adjusts dynamically, and that's based purely on application needs. And we've also started to see a rise in the use of digital twins as well, where digital twins can be leveraged to simulate failovers without touching production. This is truly a new era in network operations that thinks ahead, acts instantly, and runs itself. Now, I mentioned a little bit earlier about business operations and how we can use natural language. Let's talk a bit more about that, where business intent can actually become executable automation without the need for a mediator or translation. So imagine a business team that can describe their goals in plain language and automation engines that can build those workflows instantly. This is the vision when we talk about business operations being powered by LLMs. What we're advancing towards is a new type of medium where we have no more tickets, no more development bottlenecks. It's going to be just real-time self-service automation. And this is a process where we have business workflows that can be created with zero code and adapt dynamically, whether it's shifting KPIs, user feedback, or a changing business landscape and changing business conditions. So this is automation that is going to become KPI aware and constantly aligning with business intent. And the most compelling piece of this is having our business users in the driver's seat, really launching that powerful cross-functional automation without writing a single line of code. And now let's talk a little bit more in terms of how do we transform business operations? So as all of this automation becomes more intelligent, it's really not just about execution, it's about adaptation, alignment, and autonomy. And within this new era, the real breakthrough isn't just that the workflows can be built without code, it's that the workflows can actually evolve on their own. When we talk about self-modifying workflows, we're talking about workflows that continuously adapt in real time. And what that means is adjusting logic, actions, and priorities based on those shifting KPIs, user input, and business dynamics. KPI aware automation really keeps business objectives at the core because we are really using performance data to drive decisions and optimize outcomes automatically. And with that zero code orchestration piece, what we're really starting to see is that business users can actually design and deploy these complex cross-functional workflows without having to rely on IT or developers. So again, trying to break up the bottlenecks that exist today in the modern enterprise. We've talked, I mentioned a little bit about digital twins, but if we think about digital twins, it's really about unlocking a new level of confidence regarding an approach to automation. Digital twins are starting to allow enterprises to simulate real world conditions like service desk overloads or cyber attacks. And the key here is without touching production. So you're able to stress test workflows, you can validate autonomous threat response, and you can even run chaos experiments to see exactly how your systems can adapt and recover. And within that process, you can leverage synthetic data, and we can use that data with our AI models to train the model and fine tune in a safe way. And this ensures that our automations are robust before we deploy them. And this entire life cycle is really how our IT leaders can move fast without necessarily breaking things by testing those real-time changes in a controlled environment. And that really sets the stage for this future forward automation stack where we have our AI-driven observability, we have network ops orchestration, we have that autonomous security, and then we have the real-time policy enforcement. And all of that is working together to power the autonomous enterprise. Now, when we talk about this emerging automation stack, again, it's about how can we redefine how we monitor, control, and secure the enterprise from an IT perspective. And what does that look like? It means that we're moving away from static dashboards. We're starting to move towards AI observability fabric. We are starting to move away from manual orchestration to powering our orchestration through LLMs. We're also starting to see a lot of security shifts from an alert-driven response perspective to autonomous threat mitigation. And all of our compliance that revolves around this, it's moving away from manual audits over to real-time policy enforcement. When we talk about kind of compliance and incident response, all of this is no longer ticket-based. It's really going to be driven by AI-generated runbooks. And all of these trends are grounded in real industry research. And it's reflecting where we are headed with automation in IT. We're moving towards a faster, smarter, and more autonomous way to manage the IT environment. Now, although we've talked a lot about automation, we can't forget about the human aspect of this. So let's talk a little bit about the human AI interface and how that is evolving, and also the emerging role of the AI augmented CIO. Now, we always mention a lot about autonomous machines and LLMs, but we can't forget about the human in the loop. So really, when we talk about this new era of technology, we have to start thinking differently about our CIOs and how they can evolve into truly AI augmented leaders where they are overseeing these intelligent systems with new tools, skills, and even greater ethical responsibilities. Our natural language interfaces are starting to break down the existing barriers in the enterprise. And what this is doing is it's truly allowing us to have that intuitive real-time collaboration between humans and AI agents. That being said, we also have to still think about the need for guardrails. How do we ensure that we have these hybrid decision-making models and very transparent governance so that we understand every aspect of the life cycle as we start to move towards this, again, this kind of human in the loop, human and digital workforce working seamlessly together. A big piece of this is going to be designing an interface and a workflow that ensures we're not just scaling automation in a way that could invite risk into the environment. We're truly looking to scale it responsibly. And now let's talk a little bit about how would you start this journey, whether you're auditing your current tools, whether you want to start piloting AI agents or discussing an automation center of excellence. So when we talk about the roadmap, the first piece of this is always going to be, if you want to start an automation journey, you have to start with auditing your current landscape. What tools do you have today? Are they homegrown? Are they SaaS solutions? Do you understand how your data is flowing through every single system in your environment? Do you trust the ETL processes that you have behind the scenes? When you start to understand your digital landscape, you start to understand the systems, the data, the quality of the data, whether or not you have some challenges with legacy systems. You then start to think towards, okay, if we want to bring AI into this, how can we do it? It should always start with a pilot. So if you're looking at agent AI, you would start with, let's start with a small vertical of our business, and let's talk through how we can choose a use case that we can pilot the use of AI. And it's not just about the technology, it's also about how are your business users going to adapt to the technology. If you're leveraging AI agents within the IT landscape, how are you going to make sure that your team is able to successfully remediate challenges as the AI agents start running in production, and being able to really think about a holistic understanding of, are we ready for this next step in our digital transformation journey, which introduces AI into the life cycle. Once you have run a few pilots, you've maybe built some MVPs, then you start thinking towards a broader scalable solution when it comes to, again, that automation landscape. And this is where that automation center of excellence is absolutely critical. Your automation center of excellence is going to help you with building out a strategic roadmap, ensuring that you have the right stakeholder buy-in when you're talking through which types of automation you'd like to start deploying in the environment. And it's also going to help you to start talking through governance as well. How do we make sure that we understand any risk that we are starting to open up through the use of these technologies? Again, how do we make sure that we are adequately supporting these tools and that we have the right skill sets in-house, or whether we may need to do some more hiring to be able to make sure that we can maintain the tools once they have been successfully deployed. And that last piece, once you have your automation center of excellence up and running, and you want to start thinking through those simulation-based automation tools, that's really going to be the next gen. All of the building blocks to that point are helping you to ensure that you have successfully prepared your environment, your systems, your data, your people, and your processes to be able to actually leverage those really cutting edge, or I'll say bleeding edge technologies that are rapidly becoming extremely not only popular, but also rapidly showing us the power that they have in terms of generating real ROI for the business. And as we talk through this entire landscape, it's really about understanding that we are standing at that threshold of a new era where automation is no longer just a tool. It is a thinking partner that we are aligning with as humans. When you think about an enterprise and whether or not they're embracing AI-driven, these autonomous systems, the enterprises that are forward-thinking, that are starting to embrace, whether it's AI pilots, whether it's starting to run an MVP, starting to build a small center of excellence, those are the enterprises that are going to be able to move faster, adapt faster, and most importantly, lead with confidence in a world that is rapidly being defined by change. But this entire transformation, it's not a passive journey. It really requires vision, intention, and bold leadership. And the last thing that I will leave you with is we really have to think through how our CIOs are now, they're not really just architecting systems, but it's really about these intelligent ecosystems that are strategically built for agility and governed with purpose, and most importantly, powered by trust by our internal users, as well as mitigating our external risk. And the call to action here is really start now, start where you are. No matter where you are in your digital transformation journey, it's never a bad time to begin to look at the prospective journey ahead of your enterprise and how you can start enabling these technologies. Audit your existing digital landscape, start to create those pilots, gain some feedback and trust from your business stakeholders, simulate different adversarial attacks, and most importantly, once you have learned the lessons and you have these automations under your belt, then it's time to scale. And this is really what the journey is all about. It's no longer truly about what does IT do. It truly is about what IT is becoming. And with that, I will turn it back over. I hope you all enjoyed.
Yeah, thank you, Sidney. Really appreciate that. You know, I think as we transition here, I want to talk a little bit about how we take some of these concepts and the advancements in these technologies and bring them back to how do we deliver better service for our customers, how do we improve the quality in which we deliver service, how do we improve the lives of our team members, right? So they have to do less and less of the boring, mundane, time-consuming work. That's a perfect opportunity. And a couple things that Sidney pointed out that I want to reiterate because we see it in our customer base. The first is a need for a governance framework. You know, I heard a great quote about agentic AI, and it said, with agentic AI, you've just given large language models arms and legs. So be careful what you allow them to do, you know, because if you think about agents that have access to production systems, that coordination of activities that happens autonomously, there's more scrutiny that needs to be placed upon it, and the guardrails become really important. The other thing that I wanted to reiterate is I do believe this is the next, call it 5 years, is really going to be the golden age of how we deliver service and transforming that. So I think it's a really, really exciting time for everyone. And when we think about this process, we think about synchronizing the enterprise. I think that's a lot of what Sidney was talking about. How do we take the assets we have and leverage the people we have along with AI and automation? I think Gartner's now calling it human on the loop, not in the loop anymore. And how do we synchronize our enterprise to deliver better results? And just as a little bit of background, mentioned earlier, I lead product here at Team Dynamics, and we deliver enterprise service management platform with automation, AI, project portfolio management, self-service. And I want to dig in a little bit to this and some of the things we're seeing out there in the market. As you think about enterprise integration and automation, that market is fragmented, right? You have a lot of old, staid players that are trying to evolve. There's newer players, and the most recent Infotech Awards, which is based upon customer feedback, Team Dynamics rated in the leader quadrant for that. And when you combine these enterprise automation and integration capabilities with AI, it really unlocks a lot of opportunity, right? So when you think about the codeless component of it, as Sidney was talking about, when somebody wants to automate, right, a business user, most of the time the business users are the ones who have the ideas. How do we make our business better? How do we better serve our internal or external customers? How do we make our systems more scalable? Having to have a skill set where you know how to build those types of things is a real limiting factor. If you think about your own organization, think about the backlog that your teams have who have that knowledge set, the ones in the enterprise infrastructure group, whoever it might be, who has the keys to all of the production systems. That backlog is typically tremendous. And so business values identified, business values not realized for a long period of time. A lot of what we're talking about and seeing is AI and automation really shrinking that that time frame from idea to value, and being able to prototype it faster, et cetera. Codeless platforms are really key to this. So think about your organization, how many systems you have, probably 300 or more. That's the average, right? And think about all of the business processes that lace those things, those different systems together. So that's your foundation, your assets that you have. And now we think about how do we use integration automation to make that better. So if we think about key drivers for integration, you have APIs out there. They're hard to manage. If an auditor were come and ask you, how do you track where all of your APIs are in use? That's a daunting question, because there's software developers all over your organization or your partner organizations building against those APIs. And then think about asking, are they all using security protocols that match your policies? Also hard to figure out or understand. It's a risk. And a lot of this is about time. Again, I mentioned that time from idea for business value to realizing business value, and then think about the time frame when you have to adjust and learn and then retool. That becomes a tremendously long path. So from a service management perspective, we have a new service we want to implement or we want to improve one. Think about being able to shrink that innovation cycle down tremendously. Right now, I think in the future, it might be close to zero, like what Sidney's talking about. But today, it's going to just be shrunk dramatically, okay? Now, when we think about this in our own organizations, you probably are thinking, hey, we have people who know how to build these things by hand. We have a lot of automated processes, right? Well, if you think about how daunting it is, if you have those 300 systems, all of them have their own APIs or integration layers, right? Having a person or people try to learn all of that, how to do that, these bespoke ways to build, it becomes incredibly daunting. So if you think about it, every time someone goes to hand build an automation or integration, they might need to be relearning something they haven't worked on in a long time, or refreshing, and it just, again, lengthens that cycle from idea to value. And that's what we're talking about shrinking. And then I think also when it comes to security and governance, this becomes really important too, to have a single place where you can see all of your integrations and automations in action. And I'd also say, in order to prepare for the future that Sidney's talking about, when you talk about agentic actions and autonomous actions, those types of tools also need information. And if you have begun with an integration automation platform, you're better prepared for it as well, because those tools sometimes can learn from those types of applications. So we think it makes a lot of sense. We see a tremendous amount of growth in the automation area of the business. So if you think about the different areas for automation, right? You have ways to manage data, manage business processes. The data management could be actually consolidating and massaging data that's used by AI or other non-AI systems, or moving data from one place to another as part of business processes and that workflow and automation. And these are all areas where integration automation platforms, codeless, can help quite a bit. And then also, they should be leverageable by AI, right? So you think about, again, what will these autonomous agents actually use as their foundation? So when we apply this to an example of service management in IT, what we're finding is that automation can save roughly 2 to 3 months a year, right? So most team members are spending 5+ hours a week on tasks that could be automated, that could be coordinated either simply by traditional automation or by AI plus automation. That's a lot of time. I mean, if you think about your organization, think about how busy your teams are, your service teams. Think about the approval rate of new headcount in your budget. Think about the increased demands you see on a year-over-year basis. And then think about what would we do with that amount of time back. And this usually isn't, we're not seeing this benefit manifest itself in necessarily headcount reduction. What we're seeing is a couple things when you're effectively leveraging AI and automation. The first is that NPS goes up, so Net Promoter Score goes up, which is because typically, AI and automation are delivering answers to people almost instantaneously. They don't need to wait for somebody. I think we've become so accustomed to systems delivering service now for us, right? Immediate. So that's one area. The second is that when somebody has a question or a problem that can't be addressed by AI or automation, the person on the other line of that chat, that video call, the phone call, the conference, they spend the time it takes to research and fix it. The other thing that we saw was a reduction in the MTTR, which is the metric of basically how quickly you respond. Because now, rather than dealing with all these small requests that toil, we're now dealing with the more pending problems. So in the meantime, to repair drops dramatically because we're knocking a lot of these things off in an automated way, and our people are getting to that backlog faster. That's a big deal. The other benefit we've seen is that the employee NPS score, Net Promoter Score, goes up because as a resource, most people don't like just clicking a mouse. They want to engage. They want to use their brains to analyze a problem and come up with a fix for somebody collaboratively. That's more fulfilling. So, I think a lot of this is about just improving the overall operational capability, which results in higher satisfaction from customers and higher satisfaction internally, more efficient, right? More able to adjust and future-proof, which is also something I really like that Sidney said, future-proof your organization. So there's a ton of benefit here. On this slide, you can see just some of the low-hanging fruit that we see that can be automated and can be coordinated via AI. And I think just to put another visual on it, think about employee onboarding. And if you're not doing this in an automated fashion, I highly recommend looking into it. Because what we find with this particular process is it involves lots of departments. There are lots of opportunities for miscommunication. And when somebody starts, they need to have what they need to do their work. And so there are fire drills that ensue. On average, across our customer base prior to automation, this was taking about 35 hours of time. So if there's one process that we've seen that will improve the level of happiness across lots of people involved, it's this. The other thing I want to add to what Sidney said is when you're thinking about how to apply this, clearly defining some of your business problems is critical because you can throw AI at so many different problems, but what really matters? The second layer to put on it is if we're trying to build momentum, which I think is really important here because there are a ton of skeptics about not only AI and automation, but clearly both combined. How do we use these tools in a way that fixes problems that are widely recognized as being awful for anyone involved? And they're out there. Onboarding and offboarding are just two of them that we see, but there's lots. Because if you fix those problems with these technologies, people recognize that it's gotten better. And then what starts to happen is people start developing this sort of AI and automation centric mentality. We're saying, okay, well, that was pretty good. What else can we do, right? We've proven it to people with something incredibly painful, whatever that might be. And that's going to vary organization to organization. But I think that's a really, really good way to start any of these initiatives. Now, if you're thinking about a good platform, a couple things to note. No code, like Sidney said, really important. The ability to coordinate with an AI solution as well, I think is really important there. And then having access to the systems you use. Because at the end of the day, even autonomous agents need to be given keys to things. They need to be given access to the API supported, authentication, et cetera. So think about the connector, we call them connectors on our platform, the connector library that you would like. And make sure that the vendors you're working for either have the connector and then go deeper, I would suggest, because a lot of these are a mile wide and an inch deep. Really look at, for example, Workday. Workday has 1,400 actions that can take place via API. Is the vendor offering 10 or are they offering 1,200, right? There is a difference. So foundationally, there are some building blocks to make this all come together that are important. So compelling business problems that are widely painful, access to systems to fix these problems, and a no-code platform to help enable it, all critical for this. So when we think about virtual agents, right, let's take a couple of these concepts and pull them together. Virtual agents, virtual service agents, we'll call them, or support agents. Different organizations have different terminology for these things. I'm guessing all of you have these moments like I do where you wonder who's out there generating the acronyms and names for all this stuff. But let's just call it a VSA. So VSA's role is to help somebody get what they need in the most automated fashion possible. That's going to be front-ended typically with some sort of channel, be it Teams, Slack, a chat bot, an email address. Think of a channel, and it's going to have a large language model component, and it's going to try to assess what that user wants and then pair it with either data that it can pull in an autonomous fashion. So for example, I want to know what my PTO balance is. That's personalizing a conversation. I want to know what my benefits are. I want to know the status of that service ticket that I put in there. So you're using an integration component with this agent to pull data to personalize. Then one of my next things might be, hey, I need to cancel that ticket because it's fixed. Or, you know what, I'd like to submit a day of PTO. Now we're talking about automation and coordinating with AI. So you can think through a lot of these scenarios and then think through the back-end systems that would need to be involved. And if you take that business problem first approach, it's a lot easier to start visualizing how we might do this. I think when you say, hey, let's sit down and think about implementing agents and integration automation on a grand scale, it can be very daunting because there are as many tools as you have time to look at out there. But if we anchor it around key business problems and a handful of them, then we can start having a substantive conversation and start really separating all of the marketing speak and buzzwords from tools we could actually use to fix them, right? So I think, again, this is an amazing time to be involved with integration, automation, AI, service management, because I think the vision that we've all been thinking about, especially from a service management perspective for the last decade, is actually closer to fruition than it's ever been. I think the tools are finally arriving to make these things happen, right? Now, a lot of them still aren't elegant. If you're pushing the edge of AI plus automation, there are going to be issues because this technology is brand new, but it's moving at an incredible pace, which is very cool. We've in many cases as a commercial software company, we have to make sure what we deliver is going to meet expectations, that it's not smoke and mirrors, right? That's just not how we operate anyway. And not that we get it right every time, but to the best of our knowledge, when we release something, it's going to work. So there's been a lot of market hype about what's possible. And I've had a couple instances where our teams prototype and they say, look, this doesn't work. This isn't repeatable. It's not scalable. It's not accurate, right? There's a lot of hype about it, but the technology's not there yet. But 6 months later, let's say Microsoft Azure Cognitive Services has a release, and all of a sudden it works. that's amazing. Some of these business challenges we've been working on from a product perspective, that they can add these capabilities that quickly. So I think that's just going to continue. And if you're looking at vendors as well, when it comes to AI, a suggestion is, from what we've seen, go with one of the big platforms, Azure, AWS, even Google. The reason for that is that they have more resources. And what I would also say is that, at least with Azure, our products are built on top of the Azure ecosystem. Their protections for data privacy and the terms and conditions as they relate to business relationships, I think they can be superior. Not in all cases, but there's a lot of concern about what happens to the data. How is it handled? Is it being used to train a model that somebody else is going to use? So understanding all of those things is really important. And with the commercial providers, we feel like it's a little more a lot more hammered out as well. So a couple of things to note: there is a lot of frustration with some of these technologies. I think you can probably think of chatbot. I'll say chatbot was just one part of conversational AI and AI, really small, right? But we all have experience with it. Most leaders have been very frustrated with it because the technology wasn't good. It was glorified search. So I think that is shifting. If you have people in your organization say, hey, chatbots, conversational AI, we tried it, it didn't work, start over. I mean, what was possible even 18 months ago is nowhere near what's possible today. So I think that's really, really exciting. A couple quick notes. We have some really interesting solutions here combining these things. So Gainesville Regional Utilities have used integration automation to serve their pension recipients who no longer have credentials into their organization, but they can now personalize conversations and use some of these technologies using integration automation. So no longer they have to figure out how to get information out of their systems to the people at the right time. So that's really, really exciting. The other thing that I'd mention too is you have an organization like NavCare, and they're using this for automating and software deployment. So think about these. They had a problem where that was taking a lot of time. People were sick of waiting. So a great use case for this, right? So I think that we do have time for some questions. I'm sure you have lots of questions for Sidney. I will absolutely be able to answer some questions too. So I'll hand it back to, I think, Brandon at this point.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for a really informative presentation. And also thank you, Sidney, for your presentation that preceded Andrew's. And so we will now transition to our Q&A session, or Q&A portion of today's event. And just to remind you all, before we begin with today's Q&A, please direct your attention to our webinar survey available on the bottom of the presentation window. Again, thank you all in advance for filling out the feedback form. Your participation in this survey allows us to better serve you in future events. And so again, now on to the question and answer portion of our event. And as a reminder, to participate in the Q&A, just type your question into the Q&A window located in the middle of your screen, or click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. And if we are not able to answer all of the submitted questions today during our webinar, we will be sure to share them with Andrew and Sidney, who can reply to you all offline. And so Sidney and Andrew, what I'll do is just pose the question, and then you all, either one of you all could jump in and give us a response. And so our first question is from Tony, and Tony would like to know do you all have any thoughts on how we ensure proper record keeping for audit purposes, especially during incidents and with production changes? So, he's just, like I said, he's wanting to know, how do you ensure proper record keeping?
I can speak from our perspective. So any good system that is running automations should have the ability to log all of those in the steps so they can be recreated. Essentially, think about a playback feature. Now, you should also be able to turn that off. There are instances where you're dealing with sensitive information where you don't want that information stored, but that logging and traceability is really, really important, and it becomes even more important when the triggers for kicking off an automation or an integration can be actually AI agents.
Thanks, Andrew. And Sidney, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think I would add when, as we all know, right, as incidents happen, a lot of times you're in the middle of chaos, so you don't have a chance to document anything. I would say focus on using chat ops. So look at using like your Slack, your Teams. You can create structured commands there that will automatically kind of log that context. And then you can convert that over to a central store, like a change log system where you can actually track incidents. I also think there's a lot of things you can do. If you currently have a CI/CD pipeline, you can enforce tagging with any incident change requests related tickets. And I think you can also create run books. And those run books could also have kind of these form-like inputs. So you could easily start tagging incidents and lessons learned directly in the run book with included dates of the incident and the lessons learned.
Thanks, Sidney. And again, for our audience, if you all are wanting to submit any questions, like I said, go ahead and type your questions into the Q&A window. But our next question from the audience is, they're just wanting to know, what is the biggest mindset shift that an organization needs to embrace autonomous operations?
Great question. Sidney, you want to tackle that, and then I'll share my thoughts as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest mind shift change is releasing yourself from the hold of how it's always been done. That is always the biggest barrier to entry, which is, well, we've always done it this way. We've always had these systems, these processes. We've always had teams structured this way. You really have to rethink people, process, and technology, which means you have to usher in a mindset of, I know the current state is how it's been done, but we've got to rethink structurally through all of those pieces what we want this to look like in the future. So the mindset shift change really is about, I have to manage the current environment and the current structures across those verticals while simultaneously starting to build a new foundation and gain the trust, right, of my business stakeholders, of my engineering team, that the direction that we're headed in is the right one, right? And that resistance to change is always the hardest piece, just from a human perspective.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think from our perspective, the biggest change we're seeing that's required is a renewed focus on the business opportunity, be it fixing a challenge or adding new value that wasn't there before, and then thinking about it in terms of our options to fix it and throwing in the mix AI and automation, right? So on the board, when you're talking about, hey, we have business problem A, let's say 50% of our new hires, they're not ready to work for 3 days after they start. And that represents $25 million a year in lost productivity. That's a business problem. Okay, so how could we fix that? Well, you might have people in the room saying, well, let's hire more HR people and more IT people to do that. We say, well, what of this process could be automated? What of this process could be handled via AI? And just put it on the board, right? And so it's always part of the conversation. Can we use a tool that doesn't require a person to make this better, right? Does it improve our customer's life? Does it improve our team members' life? Does it improve the security of our organization, right? Those are key questions, because not everything you can use AI for you should use it for. There are certain things that are better done between human beings, but just asking the question, and then that gives you the business case to experiment. I think the key is getting from where organizations are to what Sidney described is a huge cultural shift. So how do we bridge that? And just entering it in the conversation, and at the least, someone on your team should be constantly updating their knowledge about what's possible, what tools are out there, what can AI automation do for us, and what's within reach of our organization. Because if you're JP Morgan Chase, you have a much different outlook on what's feasible than a mid-market manufacturer, right? Totally different scenarios. So having people to understand, hey, what's possible, to be able to then educate the team when a business problem arises, say, hey, we could use AI and onboarding. So let's say we say, okay, well, what if somebody requested onboarding for AI and AI would ask the questions that are typically in a ticket? Could we do that? Yeah, we could definitely do that. Are there automations at our disposal to set up Active Directory, to get them access to Salesforce? Yeah, there are. So what can we use to make this process better? And that's just one example, but I think it's a little bit of a change on how we approach the business in bringing automation and AI into the fold for every conversation. You might say, nope, AI automation can't do it. Great, we move on. It's going to be a manual process or some other tool, but at least it's being talked about every time.
Right. And so, and very well said, Andrew. And I know you all both, within that question, within your answers as well, you touched on just the need for a cultural shift in terms of how you approach automation and AI. And so, if the CEO is considered to be the new chief autonomy officer, how does that relationship, or excuse me, how does that redefine your relationship with the business?
I think I would say it starts to break down to, again, building that trust, being able to understand the journey of the business as the landscape changes internally and externally. And really almost, again, it's bringing back that human factor into it. So, okay, the CIO is really evolving the tech stack, but we have to make sure that we're bringing our people along on that journey, right? So it's really almost, you get to become this architect of intent in terms of helping your employees to take this journey, and really also hopefully evolving your understanding of the challenges that they're facing from a business perspective, and then feeding those up to your CIO.
Yeah, I think the other part of it is the proof is in the pudding, right? So I don't think the business cares so much how IT does what they do, as long as they're operating within budget. They want results. And what I think this opens the door to is improving results and improving the speed in which we deliver them. So for IT, this is a major accelerator of how much business value can be added in any given period of time, right? So I'm looking at this as a CIO saying, okay, let's say our business users are used to an average 8-month cycle. Can we use these tools to drop it to 2 and start adding more value to the business? As a CIO, that's a pretty substantial boost to the value we provide. And so I think tying it to business value is really important, because then it's not about the technology. These are just tools we use to add more business value. We're not debating, hey, a specific, should we use Azure or AWS? Doesn't matter. We're trying to say, look, I think we can get this out the door, improve cycle times. We can do it at half the time that we've done it in the past, and it'll improve the rate in which we're able to respond to the customer or an internal or external customer. It'll reduce it by 75% on average. It makes it less about the tech.
Thanks, Andrew. And to piggyback on it being not solely about the technology, obviously with automation, it's very important that humans work in unison with the technology to produce the best results. So where in an enterprise would autonomous systems create more resilience than humans alone? And Sidney, if you want to jump in first, we can get some final comments from both of you.
Yeah, I definitely would start. It would either start from operations or it would start in finance. I would say finance, to be honest, because you have such a potential to reduce the errors that are coming from manual efforts. And typically in finance, we see a lot of manual reconciliation, even to this day. And we were talking about closing your books, month end close, quarter end close. Many of those processes are still highly manual. They usually require a lot of touch points. And the key here, especially if you are a publicly traded company, those numbers really matter. I mean, we're talking about reputational risk. We're talking about regulatory fines, right? If those numbers are not accurate and presented in a timely fashion. So I think that if you're looking for the maximum impact, whether it's from a revenue generating perspective or operational perspective, and also a place where your C-suite will actually see immediate value in that transformation, I would say finance.
I have two answers there. The first is just broadly with the AI tools available to us through, Microsoft Copilot or these other assistants. If people learn how to use them, that can improve efficiency a lot. Think how much time you might spend looking for stuff, right? If you've been in a job for any amount of time, looking for information that you saw just weeks ago, or making a major change to a spreadsheet, it can be a game changer for just individual productivity. On the enterprise, from the enterprise side, I will paint it back to what are the biggest business problems. I think, honestly, AI and automation can help in almost every area of the business. I mean, that there are just, I can't think of a single area of the business that can't benefit. Where the biggest problems are, right, that's a good place to start. Obviously, we're a service management platform, so the context we see is people trying to do a better job of delivering service, making their team members happier, their clients happier. So we see a ton of value there. I also think that SecOps is a big deal because of the quantity of data that is flying at these professionals in all the different types of threats, especially as your organization gets larger. It's just nearly impossible to catch it all. And the application of AI there is substantial for pattern recognition and response. I think that's another, that will make the CISO sweat less, right?
Right. Thanks, Andrew. Very well said. And that is all the time that we have for questions today. So again, thank you, Sidney and Andrew. Information Week really appreciate your time and expertise on today's topic of perfecting IT automation for CIOs. And so in closing, we want to thank our sponsor, Team Dynamics, as well as to everyone in the audience. We appreciate your attention and participation in today's broadcast. Within the next 24 hours, you all will receive a personalized follow-up email with details and a link to today's presentation on demand. So please feel free to invite any of your colleagues and peers who may have not been available to listen to today's event. This webinar is copyright 2025 by Informa Tech Target. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted by Information Week and Team Dynamics, and the individual speakers that you heard today are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. On behalf of our guests, Andrew and Sidney, and also Team Dynamics, I'm Brandon Taylor. Thank you for your time and have a great day.